Yeah, so really, really lovely, warm welcome. So those of you who were here for the whole of the meditation will have had a little bit of a sense of what I'm going to talk about. And for all of you who've been, studying and practicing in this way, a lot of what I'm going to say hopefully will make sense, and also may add a few other kind of flavors of how we can look at these teachings and practices that we have to support really, very profound well-being for us. And as Irene mentioned, I'm also really interested in the meeting place of Dharma and life, expressions of wisdom and compassion in our world. So we're going to have a period of time for questions and responses. And so, if you want to talk about those kind of aspects, which I may or may not touch on in the talk, I'm also, really interested and up for that discussion. And any questions that you have about your practice, about life, about, no holds barred, really open to that. But what I wanted to talk about today is a principle that you'll find all through the teachings called samudaya. And, kind of unfold a little bit what that means. But it means, why do things turn out this way? This could be one way of looking at that. Samudaya. Why does it arise? Why does it pass? Why did it come to be? Why did it stop being? And we'll see that this is a really central core principle in the Buddha's teachings, and the Buddha's teachings revolve around dukkha and the liberation from dukkha. Yeah. So I'm sure we've all come across this word dukkha, and certainly in the beginning, we're often looking around, is there one word that'll just sum this thing up so that I can kind of nail down what dukkha is? And, you may have heard suffering. The Buddha taught in life there is suffering, and there is a reason for that suffering. There's a freedom from that suffering. And there's a path that frees us from all of that dukkha, all of that suffering. And suffering is a fine word to use for dukkha, but I kind of believe that dukkha is quite undefinable, and as do many other teachers. Actually, many will use the word dukkha, and that can be accessible, it can feel inaccessible, and so find out where you are. So you can translate it in your mind if you like, and you can leave it untranslated if you like. But if we're going to translate it, maybe what we might find helpful to translate it as is that condition of not being free, that condition of not feeling free. So in any way that you don't feel free, that's dukkha, okay? So that's a really wide range then, yeah? Because you might just feel just a little bit not so free, and like, oh, it could be a bit freer. Or you might feel really trapped and ensnared in something, right? All of that's dukkha. So there isn't really a word, but we could just call it the condition of not feeling free. And that's what we mean. So we just closed off that meditation with a little bit of metta, what we call condition of friendliness. Yeah. So if I keep saying Pali words, if I say a Pali word accidentally or a Sanskrit word, what I mean to say is accidentally, without context, without explaining what it means, pop it in the chat, and we'll address that immediately. And if you want, you can also unmute and say, what? I would rather you did that than sit there thinking, hang on, well, I guess I'll ask about that later. You can interrupt my flow if I have a flow. Sorry, I can stop and make myself laugh too many times doing these things. So we introduce a little bit of metta, a little bit of friendliness, a little bit of kindness, a little bit of welcoming into the end of that meditation, a little bit of compassion, right? Now, why did we do that? Why would we do that? One of the reasons is it's an expression of non-dukkha. Yeah, it's an expression of non-dukkha. Dukkha is not friendly with its experience. Yeah, it's really entangled, it's really trapped, it's really in a difficult relationship. And so the Dharma invites different ways of relating to things. And so it invites us to say, why not bring in some kindness? Why not bring in some compassion? And, those of you many of you may be familiar with the Dalai Lama's little pithy quote, which is, if you want others to be happy, practice compassion. If you want yourself to be happy, practice compassion. And it's kind of, you could say the other way, if you want others to be free, practice compassion. Yeah. If you want to be free, practice compassion. If you want to step away from dukkha, practice compassion. Yeah. Because it doesn't express dukkha. It doesn't build dukkha. And that brings us to this word samudaya. Yeah. On what is dukkha built? Okay. So we kind of briefly mentioned this kind of Four Noble Truths framework, yeah, that the Buddha would say. And it sometimes we can view it, and I think apparently this is a little bit of a Western logical, rational mindset. It's like the Four Noble Truths are the heart of the Buddha's teachings, or they are central to the Buddha's teachings. A different view, apparently, is actually to say there is no center for the Buddha's teachings, and you can't pin it down onto something that's so kind of rational, linear, logical. You know, there's suffering, there's a cause, there's an end to it, and this is what you need to do. You know, it's a handy way of kind of getting a handle there and kind of then saying, yeah, now I've got the recipe. I know how to make non-dukkha, and I just have to keep mixing it up day to day in my meditation practice. And that could be a rational way of thinking about it. So just in the same way as we might initially say, let's have a word that we can, you know, transliterate. Is that right? Yeah, just translate between dukkha and suffering. Yeah, that's what I'm going to do. And then this Four Noble Truths. So just allowing for the fact it may not be central. There may be a different way of holding a framework of the whole teachings. But if it is not central, it's still really important, and it still offers a really interesting explanation and expounding of the Dharma. But I would say the second question in there is a really important one. And sometimes we treat it as, what is the cause of dukkha? What is the cause for dukkha? So in life, there's dukkha, or there is dukkha, and there is a cause for that dukkha, and there is an ending of the dukkha. And the ending of the dukkha is removing the cause. Yeah. Cause might be a bit of a heavy word, and the actual word in there is samudaya. And the question then becomes, you know, like I put in the Buddha's quote there, when this is, that is. That's samudaya. When this is there, that is there. It's not necessarily a cause. It could be a condition. Yeah. It could be one of many things. And so I think the question of the second noble truth is actually, when there's dukkha, what else is there? When there's dukkha, what else is there? And as you'll know, you know, the Buddha then uses this word tanha, which we often translate as craving. I don't tend to use the word craving very often because I don't know. I don't hear many people saying, you know, that I really crave this and really crave that. And so I don't tend to use that word. I think it's closer word, more accessible word for me is the sense of demanding something on life. You know, and I think, you know, we often find ourselves being quite demanding at times. Yeah, I want it my way, or I'm leaving. It's like, and then you notice, oh, there's actually dukkha here because I'm being really demanding, or someone's being really demanding on me, and I start to feel that contraction. I start to feel that stress. I start to feel that agitation. I start to experience, oh yeah, there's dukkha here. And when the demanding is down, and we're in the company of those who are not demanding on us, and we're not demanding on them, yeah, we call that friendship, we call that metta, we call that welcoming, we call that kindness. It's non-dukkha. Yeah. So I find the word demanding is really helpful in that, kind of frame that. But actually, I think that was a rhetorical question and a rhetorical answer in the second noble truth. So the Buddha answers the question for us. He's saying, what else is there? Oh, you notice tanha's there, demanding, craving, however you want to translate that. But actually, what we need is a good question, and it's a good question. So what else is there? When there's dukkha, when there's an absence of freedom, what else is there? What's loud? What's quiet? What else is there? Yeah. And so the samudaya and the that inquiry is really, what have you noticed? What else is there for you when there's dukkha? Because I think that's what the Buddha's saying to check out. Yeah, that's what that second noble truth is saying. Check out what else is there. If you get to know what else is there, you actually start to see the recipe within the recipe here. Yeah. Is that okay? How are we building up this experience of dukkha? Because dukkha is built up. Dukkha depends. Freedom doesn't depend. Yeah. It's the absence of a built up thing. Freedom is the absence of dukkha, because dukkha is the absence of freedom. Yeah. Okay. So I hope this isn't too early for you yet, because it's late in the evening for me. And so I really apologize. But this is being recorded. You can come back to it in the evening, and then you'll get it on the evening vibe, if you like. Yeah. So here it is. It's a really good question the Buddha's asking us. Okay, so what else is there? What else is there? Or the other way you could frame that question is, when there's no dukkha in the experience, what else is there? Yeah. And then when it starts to come back again, okay, so what came in? What came along with it? Who is this gang who hangs out with dukkha? And when they leave, dukkha leaves. Yeah. So contraction is there. Have you noticed that? There's like a contraction of the being. The being doesn't feel free. It doesn't feel open. It doesn't feel expansive. It doesn't feel light. It feels heavy. It feels shrunken. Yeah. Someone comes to you, they make you feel stressed. It's like, oh, closing down. Actually, it's one of those evolved responses which actually makes us much less able to respond to stressful situations. Yeah. It's like the burying the head in the sand kind of response to a problem, which, maybe we can touch into later on if we find ourselves, our species, kind of doing that. Yeah. It's like, oh, it's a big problem. I'm going to bury my head in the sand. Won't go anywhere near it. Or I'm not going to be open. I'm not going to be flexible. I'm not going to be fluid. I'm going to be tight, be closed. I'm going to shut down. Yeah. So dukkha is a sense of shutting down, closing down. And that can be physical. We can literally see it, body shape changes, but it can also be in awareness. Yeah, awareness can be as big as you can imagine. Yeah. If you listen to programs about birth of a universe or distant stars and things like that, the mind, imagination, the awareness, it expands. That whole thing, it's like, well, where is that existing for you as you think about that? It's existing in awareness. So awareness can be huge. Universe, distant planets, suns beyond our sun, it's like, oh, holding all that in an awareness, an expansive awareness. Or it can be very, very shrunken down and deeply concerned about just me. I'm the me that matters. What's going on for me? What do they think of me? A dukkha building thoughts, very self-centered. Yeah? So that contraction can be of the physicality, can be of awareness. Self-inflation. Yeah. The self-importance, self-concern. What do they think of me? What do I think of them? What's going on for me? Am I going to be all right? All of this kind of self-concern, flipping around thoughts in that whole framework. That also arises when there's dukkha. A strong sense of self, and often a very fixed sense of self. Yeah. Not a fluid sense of self. And also the things that we get stressed around also seem very fixed, very rigid. Yeah. So the self feels quite separate, quite fixed, quite permanent. And so do the things we're getting stressed about seem quite separate, quite fixed, quite permanent. Yeah. And here's a subtle one that sometimes we'll notice, and certainly we can pay attention to it once we start becoming aware of it. Actually, the time pressure really builds up in dukkha. The urgency, the rush, should have done it yesterday. Haven't got enough time to do it well. But better, should have started already. Oh, no, I'm way behind. Oh, this is all pointless. All that time pressure really builds up. And when there isn't dukkha, when we really feel like we're having fun, that's saying, time flies when you're having fun, but actually time is free when you're free. Yeah. And time is contracted, constricted, constrained, and inflated in sense of importance, along with self and objects. And all of this supports the tanha, the demanding. Yeah. That demanding is there because here's this self here that must have its demands met. And those things over there that are really fixed and real and separate, they need to be in the right spot with me, away from me, whatever that demand takes that angle of. Yeah. The demanding can be greed demands, pull it towards me, get it, retain it, keep it, lock it up, make sure it's there for later, those kinds of demands. And the other kind of demands is like, get it away from here, get me away from that, suppress it, make sure no one else has to deal with that, hide it under the carpet, whatever it is, those kinds of demands. And all of those, do you see how they all actually interrelate? They actually interdepend. We're going to come on to that shortly. But what that means is understanding these dependencies isn't just like, and now we have the map of the terrible territory we should never go to with all the dragons and sea monsters, and let's stay away in Freedomville as much as we can. And anyone who slips off there, go and rescue them from there. It's actually what this all means is understanding on what these things depend is really important to kind of step our way through these teachings, right? These are teachings of there is dukkha in your experience, but dukkha is fabricated. Yeah, it's built up, and we ask, who's it been hanging out with? Who's it lingering around with? And how can we, get it away from those kinds of things? So just through that guided meditation, every so often I just threw in something which was an antidote to dukkha. Yeah. So we're doing this all the time in our practice, and I just want to kind of take a little bit of time just to kind of highlight that. So, feeling grounded, feeling upright. That's not how someone would describe dukkha. It's like I felt really grounded. I was, really upright, felt quite noble in my posture, and I was stressed as hell. But no, that's not how stressed feels. So we start to fabricate different ways, yeah, which is to say, construct, build, incline our experience in different forms. Yeah, we can relax. Oh, there I was. Just check. Say the word relax. Notice, the shoulders have gone up again. Yeah. Oh, they don't need to. I'm among friends. I don't need to have my shoulders up, heading towards the ears. Yeah, they can come down. Belly can come out. Oh yeah, don't need to. No one's going to hit me in the belly or whatever it is that I have this tendency. Belly tightens up certain times. I can soften, relax. So we can relax the body condition, but we can also relax the time pressure. And just say, actually, I'm going to do this slow. I'm going to do this slow. No one's going to mind if I take too long. I don't need to have had this done already. Release the time pressure. And each thing we do is like, okay, I feel a bit better now. Yeah, small changes like that. And so this invitation, when we're doing our meditation, do we sometimes feel like, I've got to be back in the present moment? Now, that's where I have to be. And here I am, off away from the present moment, this fantastical time you've just invented that isn't present. And yet, where are you? Well, I'm in the present moment, not being present. It's good. You're already here. Just relax. Relax the time pressure. You've already arrived. Yeah. It's not like we will soon be boarding the flight for present moment. Where are you, passenger? You're here. You're flying in the present. There's nowhere else to be. Arrive. Join us. Hey, welcome. You can never be too late. Yes, you're right on time. Right on time. Relax. When we relax that time pressure, mindfulness comes in. Where else could it have been except right here? And here we are too. Somewhat relaxed, because we relax the body, we relax the time pressure. We can also relax the sense of self. Yeah, and also relax the sense of self, which is remarkable. You know, we always have times through our day where we really take ourselves incredibly seriously, don't we? And then we have these times where we actually take ourselves really lightly. And the interesting thing is when we're taking ourselves lightly, things are flowing a little bit more. Yeah. And so we just learn to see, as I do all of these things, as I do any of these things, they start to impact each other. Yeah. So you don't need to notice the time. You don't need to notice the self. You don't need to notice the body. Yeah. It could be any of those, or it could be none of those. There could be other ways as well, because they're going to start to interplay. We're going to talk a bit more about that shortly. I'll just name a couple more ones that we can do. Okay. So we kind of mentioned welcoming, having a welcoming attitude. So there's kind of like two ways to go about our practice in very broad terms. One is change what you're paying attention to. Yeah. You know that through mindfulness. No, stop paying attention to that. Pay attention to this. The more radical way is actually just change how you're paying attention to it. Yeah, much more significant for two reasons. One is then you don't need to fiddle with the universe. Yeah. You don't need to get, I've got a really busy mind. Now I need to learn the ways of getting mind to steadiness and calmness, and it will just fix onto this thing and get out the, what do you call those, push pins and things, stick the tension on that and it stays on that. Unravels. Got to change all of that. That's really tricky, changing what keeps grabbing my attention. But if I can change my attitude, maybe that's more possible. Maybe I can meet this thing, which is annoying me. I meet it with kindness. I meet it with patience. I meet it with tolerance. Whatever it is, yeah. So I think it's easier to change the atmosphere than it is to change the object in attention, most of the time. Yeah, some of us might be wired up differently and find it a lot easier to change the objects than it is to change the atmospheres. So many ways of doing these practices, which is great, fits all of our uniquenesses. But the other thing is, if you think about it, the atmosphere of the attention, which is to say, I don't want you, or hey, you're welcome too. That kind of shift is a shift in the atmosphere of attention, the attitude, you might call it. That is what is close to us. That's what we swim in. That is what we're in. We're in that atmosphere. The object could change, but we actually remain in that atmosphere, in that mood, in that flavor, in that resonance. Does that make sense? Yeah. It's the bit that's really close to us. It's like the water we swim in. So we can change the atmosphere of our attention, and that can really help liberate the dukkha. So the most obvious one to go to would be like, welcoming, kindness, allowing. Yeah. And you just see, how far do you want to go with that? How far do you want to go with that? The final area I'll mention, and I'm not going to go that far into it today, but just allowing for it, because many of you will know these things. There's kind of insightful ways of looking at our experience, and there are ignorant, delusional ways of looking at our experience. So the ignorant, delusional way, and that's no insult to anyone because we all do it. Yeah. So it's kind of a fundamental delusion, fundamental ignorance. It's not personal. It's not yours. It's not like, oh, there you are. But someone is doing this. We're all doing this. Yeah. We tend to see things as permanent. We tend to see things as independent. We just tend to see us like, hey, I exist over here and I move through the world, and hey, world, get out of the way because I'm coming in. It's like, you're a part of the world. The world's got nowhere else to go. Nature's got nowhere else to be. It's part of you. You're part of it. We are in this, and we're, inextricable part of it. It can't be separated out. So the wisdom lens sees things as fluid, as inconstant, as a wave rising, falling, and all of these stuff. It's like, there's no beginnings, no endings to things. It's just a series of transitions of flowing, fluid, transient things. And just not believing in that separateness, not believing in that fixity, which built up that sense of something permanent, something separate. So we can bring that in and just remind ourselves, hey, I've never met anything that was permanent. Nothing's ever been permanent. And maybe I'm thinking this thing here is permanent. And that's why all that demanding, that sense of myself as permanent. Oh, everyone's going to discover that's how I really am. Selfish. No, possibly you had a selfish thought, and even maybe possibly you followed it, but you also had other thoughts today, that don't fulfill that. Maybe you had an annoyed and angry thought, and maybe you followed it, but you probably also had many thoughts of kindness and generosity, and maybe you didn't even notice them. Maybe you didn't even notice them. I was sharing something before, maybe it's just helpful to kind of give an example of unnoticed kindnesses. I was driving along the road and I thought, isn't it so nice and kind that people drive the right way on the road, on their side of the road, and they just pass you? It's like, if they didn't, I would think it was terrible. Hey, what are you doing on my side of the road? And most of the time we do. But most of the time people don't think, oh, how kind of me. Yes, tick that out as an area of kindness that I drove on the correct side of the road, or I stopped and let someone walk across the road on the crossing, and all the rest. Oh, you did do all that, and maybe you did it because you're a law-abiding citizen or whatever, but you also did it out of kindness, and you would have done it anyway. And there's probably other things that you've done to support the lives of others. So nothing is fixed, nothing can be really defined. And that's a tricky kind of teaching to hold. But actually, when we see it in this framework of dukkha, it's really, really supportive, really, really supportive. So all of these are, I don't know what to call it, like levers that open freedom. All of these, just opening, relaxing, grounding, upright, relaxing the time pressure, the body condition, the self perspective, the welcoming, what's in attention, bringing in an insight. Everything is in constant, fluid. This too must be in constant, fluid, even if I can't see it, even in this moment as I pay attention to it. So we have all of those different ways. Any of those ways will start to work. And if they make the smallest bit of difference to us, then we see, this is dependent on that. It's not independent of it. It depends on it. Depends on the attitude. Depends on the contraction. Depends on the time pressure. So we can play with that. Many little levers to play with. And the beautiful thing is, because they're all actually intertwined, they actually inter-are. Start pulling away on one of them, all of them change. You can't actually lower the time pressure without lightening the sense of self. Because as that dukkha disappears, other things change. And then there's suddenly, I feel more welcoming. How is all this happening? Because it's actually interlinked. Lift up welcoming, lower down dukkha, open out time pressure, soften the contraction. And then you might find, there's one way of doing it that's really immediate, really applicable. It's like very easy for me to do. It's like, everything's in constant. Maybe I just love that. I just see it that way and I look, it's like, of course it is. It doesn't make sense to grab onto this or push it away or whatever it is that I'm doing. It's like, then my sense of humor comes in. My self-perspective shifts. Lighten up. Immediately. So I find the way to lighten up. And then maybe then I actually start to notice, it's pretty good, but it's still something. And then maybe then I tie into one particular area that just seems like, actually, that's fun. That's interesting to look at. Maybe the time pressure is still there. Everything is lightened up, but I still feel a bit of pressure. It's like, I should be there. I should be. I think I can soften in that one. This is like just opening out a way of playing in our practice, which I hope kind of makes sense, but also feels you can shape this to your individual skills. This is like a principle, yeah, as opposed to an instruction. Does that make sense? And so one of the words for Dharma is like a law, but it's like a physical law, like a physics law. It's like if you put an heavy object in a fluid, it's going to overflow, that kind of thing. It's like, it doesn't really matter, like what the object was. It's a principle. Yeah, it will displace. Volumes displace each other. So, oh yeah, so that's a law. It's a law of physics. I don't know what it means. I don't know what it is. Yeah, I don't know how to tell you about it. But I know that happens. So it's this. This is the law of nature. Increase the time pressure, self-sense gets really tense and rigid. Yeah? Lower the time pressure, self-sense gets open. So this teaching here is a law. There are other things arising when there's dukkha. If you find out what those things are and find your way to play with them, which is our practice, the art of our practice, then you can get more free. Yeah. Learning not to demand on things. Yeah. Don't crave. That makes sense? It may or may not. Yeah. But if we find many other ways of doing it, but how do you stop demanding on something that feels really important, that feels really rigid and independent and separate? Yeah, it's tricky. Then someone saying, well, just don't make it important. So, well, I've already made it important. And now it really does feel important. It's very difficult for me to let go of that. Finding another way, drop in the insightful view, and they begin to fade. Yeah. There are always many, many ways to come at things. You could imagine it like a multifaceted jewel. Yeah. Multifaceted meaning it has many faces. And you don't always have to come at the same face. Come at many faces. Dukkha has many faces. Dukkha is itself very beautiful. It's not our enemy. It's an invitation to the dance. It's like, oh yeah, how did you come about? And how are you doing today? And welcome, dukkha also. Yeah. Having this kind of mission to get rid of dukkha is making dukkha a dukkha. Yeah. Get into a dukkha about there being dukkha. But dukkha's here to wake us up. It's an invitation to our practice. Oh, how's this coming to be? What interconnected webs of waves are swelling up and dissipating conditionally? Yeah. The way dukkha comes to be is not different to how all life appears. We ourselves are a gathering together of interconnected webs of waves, swelling and dissipating conditionally. All the thoughts we think, yeah, all the thoughts that are thought, and we say, I think about them, may have that kind of self element in, although, I don't think any of us have thought a thought that we thought we would think. You just seem to think the thoughts that came along, as if thought radio is just playing, and every so often we do, what is that? Oh, yep. Well, I just thought. Did you? How did you do that? How fascinating. But that's how it comes. It's interconnected webs of waves, swelling, dissipating conditionally. So basically, all of our experience, all of the sensations, are you deciding to feel, the buttock on the chair or whatever it is, these sensations, they're just arising. Things are just arising, dependently originating, dancing into and out of existence. And so I know that many of the San Diego Sangha at the moment are diving into the Sati Patana Sutta, which is such a deep, profound, beautiful teaching that we can really go into. And dukkha samudaya is right there in the center of it. Upon what does this depend? Yeah. This body sensation, this moment of experience, as it's arising, as it's passing. Yeah. So I'm not quite sure what the translation you're using is using for samudaya. Often notice the origination, notice the fading away, notice the arising, notice the passing. Those kinds of language. That's the samudaya in the thing. And so sometimes it's translated as the how. Notice how it is arising. Notice how it is passing. And that's that invitation. Don't just notice that it is arising and passing, but notice how it's arising and passing. Notice the stress arising and passing. Attending to the arising factors, the arising conditions, attending to the dissolution factors, the dissolution condition. What leads to the pain? What leads to the ease? And what leads to the vibrations? What leads to the release of tensions? And so this samudaya exploration is also an exploration of a principle called fabrication. How all things are made or come to be this way. And just to give you a brief overview of, like, where this whole teaching is heading. So the third noble truth, nirodha, the cessation of fabrications, kind of in the same neighborhood as nibbana, the goal of the Buddha's teachings, is also referred to as the unfabricated, the non-made. And all our experiences are made. And so the path goal, in a sense, is to unmake built up experiences. The most built up experience is dukkha, as very profound suffering. Psychological distress, suffering. And the lighter experiences we call delight, because they are delighted. They have been made light. Profoundly liberating feeling, where less and less is impacting on this immaterial consciousness. Becomes more boundless, more and more boundless. And so even the interesting thing, this nibbana, this going beyond the fabricated experience, is actually suggesting that even one step back from profound peace, one step back from even the non-perception of even immateriality, let alone materiality, let alone this form, material thingness that we get often very obsessed about. Have I got enough of the things? You can even get attached to the immaterial, the awarenesses, the time, the things which are not things, things which are not things. One step back from the complete release from that, and the Buddha's like, a bit of dukkha there. It's a bit dukkha-ish around here. There's some grabbing, some agitation. He's really talking about a very, very profound peace beyond peace in relationship to anything. So just kind of like knowing, okay, so that's the big overview of where we're heading here. But I would say our practice then sits in that, and we decide, well, how far do you want to go? How far do you want to go with this? Does that sound appealing? Does that sound like annihilation and not appealing? I just want to be more loving. And so that's fine. Understanding what your goal in your practice is also really important. Understanding what you want to develop, understanding what you want to invest in, and what you want to divest from. But whatever we're doing, we're moving along a spectrum of dukkha. Understanding that it can be really, really intense, and it can be really, really, really light. Really, 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 really light. And it will still be fabricated. It will still be samudaya. Will still be the relevant question. How is this coming to be? And moving in relationship to any appearance of anything at any time is the art of meditation. Shaped by that goal of meditation for us in this moment. A way we could describe that is that there's a universal pattern language, and it is samudaya. But we use it for our personal shape. It's a universal pattern language. On what does this depend? This moment, however you feel right now, it's dependently arising. Dependent on the bodily fabrication, dependent on the thought streams, dependent on how you're paying attention, what you're paying attention, the atmosphere and the objects of attention. Dukkha is a fabrication, and it can be unfabricated. When we get a sense of how it comes to be. And understanding that all experiences, all appearances are to some degree dukkha, which is not an insult to them, just in the same way as earlier when I said we're all ignorant. It wasn't an insult to any of us. It's like, oh, there's always something to learn, isn't there? It's just another way of putting it. Yeah. And a kind of a sankhara dharma, a dharma which is interested in how are things fabricated, sankhara meaning fabricated, is what's supporting this experience to be this way? How is this made? How is this coming to be? Asking, what else is here? Kind of widens our lens from this, get very intense around just this. Yeah. How it depends, deepens. So we ask, on what does this depend? It widens. Just the question itself widens. And widening is less contracted, less dukkha, just in asking the question. How it depends informs us, incites us. It's dependently arising, of course. How is it depending? And that deepens us. So widening, deepening. Widening us more into interconnection, and less contraction. Perhaps until even any conception of us being a separate node over here makes no sense. And then how is this depending? Invites us to pull away what seemed like irreversible. That's just how I am. You just got to accept me how I am. Felt like foundational, felt like bedrock. We're actually going to deepen down through that, softening through that like water. And going deep, deep, deep into the earth. It's just a meshed mat of codependent conditions. It's not bedrock. That softens, deepens, loosens. Come deeper into the being, into a more sensitive, more quiet place, more delightful way of relating to the subtleties of life. And this beautiful path that's offered to us, and we can go as far as we want with it. Let's just have a quiet minute together, and then we'll open out for some questions.